Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the April meeting of the House Opportunities Commission. I'm Roy Priest, the chair, and I'm joined on the diocese today by Commissioner Fran Kelleher, and also joined virtually by Commissioner Robin Solomon, Chair Pro Tem, and Commissioner Pamela Byrd. Our other two members are on their way, but we have a quorum, so we can proceed with the meeting. I also like to just take the liberty to acknowledge the fact that we have present our staff president, vice president, and our staff president as well. And I also notice in the audience we have a young man there who is our youngest participant I've seen at a meeting in a very long time. So he's going to be an aspiring commissioner or an employee. I'm not sure which one. Take the job working on the staff, not on the commission. Okay. So welcome all of you all to our meeting and those who are here with us virtually. We will start the meeting usually by adopting the agenda for the meeting, and then we'll proceed by the community forum. We have not had anyone that's indicated that they want to speak in the community forum portion of the meeting. Are you desirous of wanting to speak at the meeting? What is your name?
There's a noted.
Commissioner Priest, the normal procedures is that community forum has to, a member of the public has to sign up by 4 p.m. the day before.
Yeah.
And we have not had anybody sign up. So based on those procedures, it's up to you.
Ms. Troutman, the normal procedure is that someone who wants to speak at a community forum have to sign up by 4 o'clock on the day before the meeting.
Voting on the bylaw that impacts for properties that you guys oversee, and the vote is tomorrow. So I think now or
This is a property up in which property are you talking about?
Lakeshore Drive.
Chair Priest, we could just have staff step out and try and gain a better appreciation
Yeah,
of what
we
her
can.
issue is.
We'll have someone on the staff who will meet with you right now and see if we can resolve that for you, okay? Who would be the appropriate person to do that? Would that be our ombudsperson?
Ombudsman.
Bonnie? You can,
Property manager that's number 5. So yeah.
okay, all right. Thank you very much for coming to the meeting. Okay, with that, we will proceed with the report from our president, Chelsea Andrews.
All right, thank you. Well, actually, do we start with the report with me? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners, members of the public, and the HOC team. I'm pleased to share highlights as it pertains to HOC's activities in the month of March. Next slide. This month will highlight activities related to the Women's History Month of March. We will acknowledge 3 prestigious awards that we've received: HOC in the Spotlight, highlights from our Resident Services Division, updates from the Housing Resources Division, our real estate development activities, as well as provide an update related to maintenance and the activities that are underway. The reason why we provide these updates is so that members of the public can be aware of the program and activities that we have ongoing. Many of these resources are available to members of the public. We encourage them to participate and to take advantage of them. They can do so by visiting our website at www.hocmc.org. Next slide. I'd like to start by acknowledging that in the month of March, there was Women's History Month. This is a month where we acknowledge the contributions that women of all backgrounds have made throughout history in the United States, both by remembering those who paved the way for the struggle for gender equality, as well as recognizing history makers and barrier breakers of today. I'd like to acknowledge our HOC women directors, Commissioner Pamela Byrd, Commissioner Linda Kroom, as well as Commissioner Fran Kelleher, as well as our HOCP commissioners that are supporting our efforts on a daily basis with our nonprofit, that is Board Director Teresa Finley Dumais, as well as Lexan McDowell, Elaine Fitzgerald, and Alexander Nassau Brownstone. Next slide. And also, we are very fortunate to have a number of female executive leaders in this agency paving our path. And as you see them highlighted, they make a great deal of positive impact in all aspects of our work. Everything from my Senior Executive Vice President, of course, Kareem Brown, Tia Blunt, our Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications, Vice President of Human Resources, Elaine Cole, Vice President of Compliance, Darcel Cox, our Vice President of Housing Resources, Lynn Hayes, our Chief Ombudsman Officer, Bonnie Hodge, and our Senior Vice President, Asha Menman, and also General Counsel, and our Vice President of Resident Services, Davida Rowley Blackman, just acknowledging the contributions that all of these women continue to make to support the work we do. That month, we also in the month of March acknowledged all of the women who paved the path for us in the history of HOC, and encourage you all to check out the blogs that include detailed information on all of those women. If we've missed anyone, please do let us know, because we surely want to acknowledge and celebrate all of the accomplishments of the women that have led our organization.
I would suggest we acknowledge Ms. Williams, our RAB president,
Oh, absolutely.
Washington.
Miss
Yes.
Washington, yes. Okay, thank you. Next slide. We also are fortunate to continue to receive accolades for the work that we're doing in regards to various aspects of our business. In this regard, we received a wonderful acknowledgement of being the best affordable apartment community. That's Residents on the Lane in Rockville by the National Association of Home Builders. And we also had an opportunity to be spotlighted in a great article from Fast Company that featured HOC, the HPF, and the laureate. Next slide. We also received again, and this is the 18th time our agency has received this tremendous acknowledgement for our financial excellence. It's the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And I want to just thank our finance staff for always really excelling in all that they do and representing us well. Next slide. We had multiple activities that took place in the month of March. As you see highlighted, workshops with regards to our fundamentals of housing, resource sharing, activities for our youth at Stewarttown Tutoring, apartments, both the Shady Grove Apartments and the Willows that have ongoing STEAM programs. Next slide. And resident well-being activities for our youth at Tanglewood Apartments, that's with Piano Pals. Next slide. Multiple activities took place for our youth and family. As you see the dates highlighted here at Paddington Square, a Paint a Flower Day at Town Center Place, as well as residents at Town Center Place who participated in a bingo and egg hunt event. Next slide. We also had activities at Stewarttown with the International Women's Day event that was held for the residents there. Residents at Magruder participated in spring-themed activities. I can go on and on, but you see that we continue to keep our residents engaged. Next slide. And more activities from computer literacy classes. And these are the activities that we focus on for our seniors, arts and craft, bingo, etc. Next slide. And more activities for our seniors. This is where Montgomery County Police Community Service Officer provided our residents at our COLA with safety tips. And we continue to have a wonderful partnership with our nonprofit partners. The Joy of Moving event takes place often at our Waverly House. Next slide. And we have multiple activities at Bower Park, Arcola Towers, Waverly House. Students play classical music for our residents as well in the month of March. Next slide. And more activities. And so we're highlighting all of the various activities, smartphone, workshop for our seniors, participating in bone builders exercises, as well as a trip to Rio Lakefront in Gaithersburg. Next slide. We had health and well-being activities because of the wonderful partnership we have with University of Maryland nursing students who provide resources and support for our residents, as well as programs that happen at Forest Oaks, yoga dancing at Residence on the Lane. Next slide. In regards to our support that we provide to our residents by way of supporting them with renovation, relocation, as well as resident services to ensure that our residents know about various resources, we continue to do that outreach. Next slide. And we also continue to ensure that our residents have access to food resources. So hundreds of residents received food in the month of March through our partnerships. Next slide. We have a variety of activities that take place with HOC Academy, youth enrichment series in our after school programs. You see highlighted in these beautiful photos. We had 95 students participate in a field trip to Joint Base Air Force Base, as well as 23 students attended the Day of Drones middle and high school event at HOC Kensington Gym. Next slide. And we also have a partnership where Paradigm Companies host a monthly virtual employment opportunities session, as well as a resource fair that was held at Tanglewood Apartments for residents at both Tanglewood, Manchester Manor, and Spring Gardens to learn about various resources and activities available to them. Next slide. Our financial literacy coach continues to provide resources to customers and individuals on the waiting list, with multiple customers and waiting list participants participating in the month of March. Next slide. We've served over 350 participants with home visits in the month of March. These are individuals who need wraparound services, continue to provide support for emergency voucher participants, as well as provide and continue to offer our rent supplement program. We currently have 280 residents enrolled in this program. Next slide. We graduated 21 fathers from the Fatherhood Initiative cohort in March, and 29 fathers are now enrolled. Next slide. And our housing choice voucher program continues to remain strong. We are at 98% utilization. We had 76 families that were issued vouchers, 156 contracts that are pending, and 150 families were selected from the waiting list. We only received one request for an extension in the month of March. So families are finding units and able to lease up within the 90-day period. Next slide. We are always offering the ability to utilize technology and have had over 400 customers submit their paperwork electronically in the month of March. And we did have 70 customers recommended for program termination. However, we were able to assist 58 families to avoid termination, and therefore only 12 families are currently pending termination. We will continue to do that outreach to support them in hopes that we can help them remain housed. Next slide. Of our allocation of 118 emergency housing vouchers, we have 103 families that have successfully leased, and we have a number of one applicant that's currently searching for a suitable home, 3 ported to other jurisdictions. Next slide. And our family self-sufficiency program, we've enrolled 363 participants. We had 2 participants graduate last month, and 1 that established employment at Montgomery County Public Schools, and 1 is an independent hair consultant. And our FSS team is working with PNC as it pertains to homeownership workshops. 55 customers participated in that event. That was a very successful outcome. Next slide. And we continue again to receive acknowledgement. I previously discussed the award that we received for Residents on the Lane. And as the commission is aware, moving forward with Wheaton Gateway. So in regards to our construction manager. So on the move, and you'll hear more about that recommendation in today's board meeting. And next slide. Our maintenance team is also continuing to explore various ways to reduce our costs and ensure that we're most efficient with our water conservation efforts. We're doing a full analysis of 14 properties right now, conducted by water management to determine if we should take different steps or any other cost savings measures we can put in place to reduce our water consumption at those sites. Next slide. This concludes my president's report. I open for questions and or comments.
Any questions from commissioners? Virtually, Pam or Robin? Seeing none. We will now proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is in fact Commissioners Exchange. I don't know if any commissioner have anything they want to share. Commissioner Merkowitz?
Thank you. Just wanted to bring to the attention of fellow commissioners as well as the general public that the National Low Income Housing Coalition recently put out their annual report called The Gap, which highlights the need for affordable housing at different income levels. And I just wanted to point out that in Maryland, for every 100 households that have an income, an extremely low income that is at 30% area median income or below, there are only 32 affordable and available housing units. And at 50% area median income in Maryland, there are only 59 affordable and available homes per 100 renter households. These are for renters. They don't have data specific to Montgomery County, but they do have data on the Washington metropolitan area. And I would say the numbers are even worse there. At 30% and below, it's only 26 available, affordable and available homes for every 100 renters that are below 30%, and only 53 units affordable and available for those earning 50% or below area median income. So just wanted to highlight those numbers that really demonstrate the importance of the work that we're doing and the need to really reach down as deeply as possible that we're able to in terms of who we're serving. So thank you.
Any other comments? We will thank you for that information, Jeff, because the National Low Income Housing Coalition is certainly one of the major organizations that has been an advocate for affordable housing for so many years. I have worked with them so many years in the past. I know you have as well, others. So thank you for that. I will now move the agenda to the report of the Investment Advisory Board, and I would invite Irma Washington to come. And is your vice president here yet? Yes, we will move the agenda and we'll come back to you when we have a break in the next item, okay? Okay, when he gets here. Thank you very much. The next item of business is in fact approval of minutes. The approval of minutes for February 29th, 2024 open session, March the 6th, 2024 for open session, and also March 6th closed session. Can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Probably moving a second to approve these specific minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. The next item on the agenda is in fact a consent item, which relates to our single-family lending and the approval of a new participating lender for the single-family mortgage purchase program. I will turn to our President Andrews.
Commissioner Chair or Chair Priest, this is a consent item. This is one of our standing requests that we present to the board in regards to adding a lender. We did provide this information at the DevFin committee and open to any questions that might be raised.
Are there any questions or comments about this matter? If not, I will accept a motion to approve the consent item to approve the specific participating lender The name of the lender is Atlantic Mortgage LLC.
Atlantic Mortgage LLC. For the record, I'm Karen Brown.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Byrd. I second it.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, so ordered. We will now move to our committee reports and recommendations for action. The first committee report will come from the Administrative and Regulatory Committee. It's chaired by Commissioner Kelleher.
Thank you, Chair Priest. This month, the Administrative and Regulatory Committee assisted with the review of the fiscal year 2025 5-year Public Housing Agency Plan. During the month, there was a public hearing held, and we also have received from the Resident Advisory Board a letter endorsing the fiscal year 2025 5-year Public Housing Agency Plan. Is there anyone from staff who would like to introduce this topic?
Yes, thank you. As you stated, Madam Committee Chair, this is a HUD required submission of our plan related to any and all of our HUD programs. And this provides our path forward for the next 5 years. What's captured includes high-level insight on our approach with the voucher program, Fair Cloth to RAD, Fatherhood Initiative, compliance with HUD regulations and updates. I'll turn it over to Elliot Rule, our management analyst, to provide more details. And make sure you're.
Sorry. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Elliot Rule. I'm a management compliance analyst with HOC's compliance division. I'm here today to discuss the submission of HOC's fiscal year 2025 5-year Public Housing Agency Plan. We have your PowerPoint. Thank you. And go to the next slide, please. The Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act of 1998 requires public housing agency plans to inform HUD, residents, and the public of plans to serve the needs of low and very low income families. The plan focuses primarily on HOC's public housing and housing choice voucher programs. This year, HOC is submitting its fiscal year 2025 5-year plan, which covers the period of fiscal year 2025 to 2029. The 5-year plan sets forth HOC's mission, goals, and objectives for the 5-year period covered, as well as the progress HOC has made towards meeting its goals for the preceding 5-year period of fiscal year 2020 to 2024. Subsequent annual plans will provide updates to this 5-year plan. The fiscal year 2025 5-year plan outlines HOC's goals and objectives for fiscal year 2025 to 2029. Agency goals include development and delivery of affordable housing through acquisition, renovation, and new construction by leveraging creative financing solutions. This includes HOC's collaboration with Montgomery County government, which created a $100 million revolving housing production fund expected to create approximately 6,000 new housing units over 20 years. HOC is exploring new ways to use local funding to expand housing subsidies, and HOC seeks to bolster its federally funded Fatherhood Initiative program. Under its public housing program, HOC previously converted all of its public housing units to more efficient forms of HUD subsidy and continues to administer the updated subsidies. HOC's public housing program remains open to facilitate the use of HUD's Fair Cloth to RAD program on future developments. The first of such projects will be Springvale Terrace, for which HOC will provide up to 48 subsidies. Under its Housing Choice Voucher program, HOC's Housing Resources Division is currently implementing updates to the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act of 2016, or HOPMA, as well as the new national standards for physical inspection of real estate inspection standards set to replace the current housing quality standards. The Housing Resources Division is continuously seeking to expand its Housing Choice Voucher and project-based voucher portfolio and monitors HUD notices of funding availability for such opportunities. In terms of other affordable housing opportunities outside of HOC's Housing Choice Voucher and public housing programs, HOC's Real Estate Development Division has 4 projects in the pipeline, which will provide a total of 634 affordable units. Additionally, HOC's Wheaton Gateway project is expected to deliver 770 units but the project is in its early stages and the affordability component has yet to be determined. Over the previous 5-year period of fiscal year 2020 to 2024, HOC was able to make substantial progress in providing affordable housing opportunities throughout the county and supportive services to its customers. Under the public housing program, as mentioned, HOC converted all of its previous public housing subsidies to more efficient forms of subsidy through HUD's Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD program. This included Section 8 project-based rental assistance and project-based voucher subsidies. The conversion included a total of 877 units over 11 properties, and HOC continues to administer these subsidies. HOC currently has a program baseline of 7,770 vouchers, which includes 860 project-based vouchers. HOC has an additional 330 project-based vouchers granted through RAD and HOTMA, which are separate from the baseline. HOC's project-based voucher program highlights the addition of 268 project-based vouchers to its portfolio over the previous 5-year period, as well as the conversion of 100 vouchers to project-based vouchers based on local need. HOC's tenant-based voucher program was awarded 185 new vouchers, primarily for families experiencing homelessness. HOC received special HUD approval to increase its payment standards above the normal limits for the years of 2023 and 2024 in order to reduce rent burden and allow families the greatest access to high-cost areas. During 2022, HUD required all public housing agencies to update their family self-sufficiency action plans, which included mandatory and discretionary regulation updates. During 2023, HOC updated its Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA policy, to include emergency VAWA transfers under the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Outside of HOC's public housing and housing choice voucher programs, HOC was able to preserve, create, and upgrade approximately 1,259 affordable housing units during the last 5 years. Other accomplishments achieved by HOC include weathering the COVID-19 pandemic and improving on operations post-pandemic. This included adopting 28 COVID-19 waivers through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. HOC's Housing Resources Division worked assiduously to increase its utilization rate to 98%, and HOC's Resident Services Division was able to continue to provide supportive services to its customers, including educational programs for the youth and health and wellness programs for adults and the elderly. HOC's federally funded Fatherhood Initiative program was able to meet its enrollment targets for the period of fiscal year 2020 to 2023 and is on track to meet their goals for fiscal year 2024. HOC looks forward to working with the public and improving on ways to provide affordable housing opportunities and supportive services to the community in the future. I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time.
If there are no questions, then having reviewed this with the committee of the Resident Advisory Board and held a public hearing, we are at a point where I would recommend that we vote to approve the fiscal year 2025 5-year public housing agency plan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution number 24-25. Any questions? None. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. The next item, committee report, comes from our Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee, in which I serve as the chair. This matter is being brought to us now, dealing with the procurement for property management services to several of our properties. I will now turn to our President Andrews for a presentation on this matter.
Thank you. Commissioners, we continue to bring forward recommendations to move forward with property management contracts. As you all know, we're doing so in tranches so that we can ensure proper transition. I will turn it over to our Vice President of Property Management, Ali Ozair, to provide this presentation.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to present to you staff's recommendations to select property management agents for the properties referenced on page 82 of the board brief book. These 14 properties include Barclay LP, Fairfax Court, Fenton Silver Spring, Residences on the Lane, Shady Grove, Apartments, Dale Drive, Manchester Manor, Camp Hill Square, Southbridge, Tanglewood, and Sligo. Spring Garden Apartments, The Villas, Timberland Crescent, and Pooks Hill Court. The current contract for each property is expected to expire on June 30th of 2024. Staff is recommending to award management agreements for each of these 14 properties to either Edgewood Management Company or Residential One, as listed on the table starting on page 83. There are no proposed changes in the management agents. The new contracts will be effective from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026, with 2 one-year options to renew by HOC. The management fees are expected to increase from $595,000 to $719,000, an increase of $123,000. The increase in management fees is driven by the proposals assuming 100% occupancy, while our budgets are adjusted for vacant units. Additional reasons are adjustments for inflation and several properties changing from contract assisted to fully third-party managed. Staff recommends the commission authorize the executive director to execute these contracts with the respective management companies.
From the commissioners related to this specific item?
In the materials provided, if you can hear me.
Yes.
It would be helpful in the future if you would put down the percent of revenues that the management fee represented versus just the hard dollar amount, which doesn't really give us any context. Would that be okay?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. We did ask these fees to be a per unit per month number.
Understand.
And yep, thank you.
It's a, is it 3% or 9%? It's obviously neither. It'd just be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? If not, I make a motion to approve resolution 24-26 related to procurement services for our 14 separate properties. Got a second?
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
Properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Resolution 24-26 is approved.
Thank you.
I will now go back to an earlier item on our agenda, which was dealing with the report from our resident advisory board. And now that I see that our vice president and president are both present, I will ask you all to come forth and make your presentations. Irma Washington, who is the president, and Adam Pinchuk, who is in fact the vice president. Good evening. Is your mic on?
Good evening. I'm Irma Washington, president of the RAD board, and
I'm Adam Pinchuk, vice president of the RAD board.
and we're here to talk over what we did in the last 30 days of our meetings. And I would leave Adam to talk to you about the meeting that we had with the yeah, Mr. there. You have to forgive me.
So good afternoon, commissioners. At our last RAB meeting, we had the pleasure of meeting with Ali Ozair, Vice President of Property Management, to discuss the important topic of third-party property management companies that oversee HOC-owned properties. We had a wide-ranging discussion which shed light on various aspects of property management companies and what their roles and responsibilities are in overseeing these properties. And I would like to take this opportunity to summarize some key recommendations as well as some unresolved questions that board members had at the conclusion of our meeting. I want to preface this by saying that we're aware that we're still relatively new to this, that some of these recommendations may be things that you've already considered and or already have implemented. But this is where the board landed after our meeting last month. So in the interest of time, I have distilled these down to the more salient issues as they relate to residents of HOC-owned properties. So the first issue is enhanced training programs. We believe as a board that it's important for HOC to implement training programs and maybe even incorporate them in future contracts, that these training programs should be overseen by HOC staff to contracted property managers. Training should focus on tenant relations with an emphasis on the importance of responsiveness, empathy, and professionalism in interactions with all the tenants. We understand that many of these third-party management companies have experience in affordable housing management,
but it was the consensus of the board that additional training only benefits the management companies as well as the tenants and ensures that management companies engage in best practices at all times. Customer service accountability measures should also be incorporated in all future contracts, as well as training. We believe it's important to establish clear performance metrics related to customer service and tenant satisfaction, and incorporating these metrics into the contracts with the third-party property management companies by holding them accountable for addressing any deficiencies in customer service through corrective action and performance improvement initiatives. Most importantly, we believe it's important for either the third-party property management companies or HOC itself to implement a robust yearly survey for feedback from tenants to express their experiences and their concern. These lines of feedback should not be limited solely to Rent Cafe, but should include surveys that are both emailed and mailed directly to all tenants. Audits. We are aware that audits do occur. We didn't quite get a sense of how frequently they occur, but it was the sense of the board that audits should at least be conducted annually, if not biannually, on all property management companies that manage any HOC properties. We also believe it's important that audits should be triggered by specific events, such as complaints from tenants, allegations of misconduct, or significant changes in property management personnel. We also believe that there should be an emphasis on these audits on customer service satisfaction and how they treat the tenants. So we would also like to see that happen. We also would like to know what are some of the consequences for failing an audit. What are the metrics for determining an audit failure? And what are some of the established standards and procedures for dealing with failures of audits? So to that end, the board recommends that HOC might consider establishing protocols for corrective action for everything from small infractions to more severe penalties that include anything from fines, sanctions, or even the termination of the management contract itself. We also believe strongly that the outcomes of these audits should be publicly available in plain language as soon as practicable after the completion of an audit. We also discussed enhancing communication channels specifically for tenants who live on HOC properties managed by third-party private contractors between these tenants and HOC directly. While we recognize that for tenants, the first point of contact should be with their on-site property manager, there are situations where there may be persistent unresolved matters that RAB recommends the following: assigning specific individuals or teams within HOC to serve as the primary point of contact for tenants with unresolved issues. This person should have the authority to coordinate efforts across departments and escalate matters as needed. Also, again, to provide multi-platform communication channels for tenants, and these again could include email, phone, and Rent Cafe. And the board wanted to express that these issues should not be confined solely to management, to issues such as building maintenance, but also to tasks that are delegated specifically to property management companies, including recertifications of the tenant's income or rent on an annual basis. There should also be a commitment by HOC to acknowledging receipt of tenant inquiries or complaints within a specified time frame, to provide follow-up and reassurance that their concerns are being addressed, and also to provide them with regular updates on action being taken to resolve any concerns that have been brought to the attention of HOC. So those were the main points that were raised at the meeting. We just want to say that we believe that both the RAB and HOC believe that every tenant interaction with property management company should be a positive one. And we hope that some of these recommendations will in part help property management companies achieve that goal across all HOC owned properties and uphold the standards of excellence, integrity, compassion that HOC represents. On behalf of the board, I would like again to express our deep appreciation to Mr. Ozair for giving his time and answering our questions last night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have not, even though we hear you right now, please provide your recommendations in writing so that we can, in fact, give you a formal response back to the points you raised. I know some of these things are, in fact, included in some of the protocols we already have, but we ought to be able to tell you that, okay? For example, I know, for example, all of our properties, they're property managers. They're the first point of contact and should be for all of our residents, whether they are living in properties that we manage or are managed by a third party. So, if there's an issue, we need to address that. But we will certainly look forward to getting the comments from you and providing a formal response back to you all. So, any other questions to that, representatives? I do also want to just say thank you all for the comments that you made around the public housing plan. I thought they were very comprehensive and well focused in terms of the kind of issues that should come from the community and from residents about the way we operate and will carry our operation forward. So thank you all for the comprehensiveness of your comments. We appreciate that very much. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Are you all finished?
I'm finished with my presentation.
Oh,
President
I thought you
Washington
were
might have a few more follow-up items.
Yes, I'm just wanted to say that we did meet with the Mr. Elliott Rule on the 5-year plan. And we had they went over the plan, but we had some questions that we wanted them to address. They gave us a timeline and we met and we didn't get the completion of the questions answered. But I did sign the approval. But we would still like, if possible, if we can get the completion of those questions that we have asked them.
Sure. I know that there were some recommendations you made also relative to how we publicize information and public hearings on that. And in fact, that has been implemented. Chelsea Andrews was telling me that it has been publicized now on our social media with Facebook, et cetera, as well as information was put up in every building so that tenants would see it in their own building and have information there. And we will continue taking full advantage of your recommendations in the future to help tenants understand better what's happening and how they can participate. Thank you for those.
And one more thing, I did do that about the publication part. I went to the library also. And the library has the Beacon and they have the Only newsletter and they have the Jewish Weekly print. And so if those two could have been used for publication for they're free newsletters, so no one has to pay, like the Post or.
Absolutely. And in fact, I hope you, if you have not obtained, we will provide the written response to each of the recommendations, which include moving forward with looking at and publishing in free publications, as well as there was a comment around the potential of having an evening meeting for our public meetings. That was something that was also well received. It really was a matter of timing in terms of us being able to get all of these notices out, but we definitely deployed as quickly as we could the recommendations that you provided. And I just also want to welcome you to share. I took copious notes with the comments that you provided here to the board. I will also follow up with you all in regards to the property management suggestions you have so that you could understand not only what's currently in place, but what will be in place in the near future, and welcome that exchange with me as well so that I can provide you with updates. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so we will make
sure that
you get it.
Right, we were anticipating a direct response to the board, and that's what we were looking for.
And we didn't receive it.
Yeah.
Sure. We can make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll proceed with back to the agenda, where we will go to our Development Finance Committee that's chaired by Commissioner Merkowitz.
Thank you, Chair Priest. The first item on our agenda for the Development and Finance Committee is a procurement item having to do with the creation of a pool of legal firms from which HOC can select when it needs specific legal services. And I will hand it over to.
Yes, thank you. And this is a pretty straightforward request that was presented to the Development and Finance Committee. I'll turn it over to Paige Gentry, our Deputy General Counsel, to provide an overview.
Thank you, President Andrews, and good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Paige Gentry, Deputy General Counsel here at HOC. So I'm here today to request that the Commission approve the four following requests. First, the establishment of a legal pool with 17 qualifying firms. Second, authorizing the President, Executive Director to enter into contracts with the firms. Third, authorizing HOC staff to engage with the firms in the legal pool on an as-needed basis. And fourth, authorizing payment for the services to the firms as I've further described in the packet. So if we can turn to 93 in your packet, slide 4, just for a bit of context, the existing legal pool expires in May of 2024. And in light of the upcoming expiration, earlier this year, HOC issued an RFQ for legal services and expanded the type of services included in the pool. So if we can go to page 94 in the packet, so back a slide, please. No, the other way. Okay. The 2019 legal pool only included a solicitation for real estate transactions and financing and the various subcategories set here in number 1. In this RFQ, we expanded the pool to include numbers 2 through 5. So employment law, advice on policy and regulations, litigation, and landlord-tenant law, as these are items that come up frequently for the Commission. So this allows HOC to more quickly and efficiently access a larger pool of firms with more varied expertise. If we can advance to slide 6, please. 19 firms timely responded to the RFQ and 17 firms qualified for the pool. And I will note that 4 of the firms that are qualified are new to the Commission. And we can hang on this slide. So the next few slides set forth the minimum qualifications and the evaluation criteria used to evaluate firms. The evaluation team was comprised of 4 HOC staff members that reviewed firms' responses for experience, staffing, fees, and MFD efforts. Firms needed a minimum of 70 points on average to qualify for a specific area of expertise. And if we can go to the next slide. So the next 2 slides, slides 9 and 10, set forth the areas of expertise that each firm applied for and for which they qualified. So those with a check mark meet the minimum points required for an area of expertise. Firms with an A didn't apply, and firms with an X didn't meet either the minimum qualifications and our minimum qualifying score. So slide 9 showed the firms that qualified for the areas of expertise in the real estate services. And then the next slide, slide 10, showed the firms that qualified for the pool in employment, policy, regulation, litigation, and landlord-tenant law. And if we can go to slide 11, page 100 in the packet. So just as an overview of how we would engage with these firms, if the Commission approves the request, HOC will enter into an agreement for services with the firm in each pool. The term of the agreement is for 2 years with 3 renewal terms of 1 year each, and initial contracts will be for $0. Once a firm is selected for a task, any work done would be paid from the following sources. So for a project that's under development right now, it would be either the approved development or the pre-development budget, or if a budget hasn't been approved by the Commission, then would come out of real estate's operating budget and then repaid once a pre-development or development budget is approved. For work related to a specific department of HOC, it would be paid out of that department's approved budget. And then for work relating to an existing property that's not currently under development, the work would be paid out of an approved property budget. So each firm's fees are based on the fees they provided in their proposal and are held steady for the first 2 years with possible increases in the renewal terms. And then the legal pool, once in the legal pool, the mechanics of soliciting quotes and selecting firms for the work is the same as for other HOC pools and is consistent with the procurement policy. Can we advance to page 102 in the packet, slide 13? So finally, this request has no direct impact on HOC's operating budget. Legal services will be sought on an as-needed basis and paid for from existing budgets. And let me know if you have any questions. Yes.
I have one question. I'd just like to make sure that the authorization to enter into agreements and service for these would be subject to the normal existing limits on spending, et cetera, so that if it was over the staff's existing authorization or authority, they would come to us.
Yeah, so I can speak to, so yes, so it starts as a agreement for $0. If we were to go out, say for something like Hillendale and the firm would come back over $250,000, then we would come to you. And I think that's happened before on prior deals where the quote initially came as say $150,000, but because there was additional work and years, then that's when we would come back to the Commission for approval for over the signatory amount.
Okay, it just wasn't explicit, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
I was going to ask the same thing you're asking, whether there was any other questions. If not, I would recommend that we support the staff's recommendation and approve resolution 2427.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
Motion has been probably moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So resolution 2427 is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda, it has to do with an amended finance plan for the Leggett.
Yes, thank you. As the commission is aware, the Leggett was constructed simultaneously with one of our largest development projects, the South Aquatic Regional Recreational Center. Despite our best efforts and for reasons outside of our control, the project was moderately delayed a number of months, which ultimately impacted lease-up. As a result, we're requesting authorization to amend our financing plan and to increase the bridge loan. I will share as an update, we are currently at approximately 75% occupancy and continue to work hard to get to full stabilization, and believe we will do so in the time frame outlined in this proposal. I turn it over to Victoria Dixon, Senior Multifamily Underwriter, to provide more information on this request.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. For the record, my name is Victoria Dixon, the Senior Multifamily Underwriter in Mortgage Finance. I'm here to request approval of the amended finance plan for the Leggett with increase of related funding source and additional applicable items. The Leggett is a 267-unit age-restricted apartment community recently constructed in Silver Spring and formerly known as Elizabeth House 3. In 2019, HOC closed into construction financing of the property with the issuance of tax-exempt private activity bonds, which proceeds were used to fund a construction to permanent mortgage loan, a taxable construction loan with PNC with an extended maturity date of April 3rd, 2024, using HOC's real estate line of credit with PNC Bank to provide a loan to bridge receipt of LIHTC proceeds, and entered into an interest rate hedge for the floating interest rate of the construction and bridge loans during construction. If you'll move to page 3 of the packet, development of the property occurred at the same time as the South County Regional Recreation and Aquatic Center and Senior Resource Center primary care facility being operated by Holy Cross Hospital. Despite the best efforts, as mentioned, construction delays resulting from a variety of factors have slowed the lease-up pace and closeout of the property for a total of approximately 9 months behind schedule. This has impacted the property's ability to achieve stabilization and convert into the permanent phase for endorsement under the FHA risk share program in the timeframe originally predicted. As a result, receipt of the completion and conversion LIHTC equity installments of approximately $28 million are also delayed. A reforecast projects stabilized occupancy to be achievable by June 2024 and permanent conversion by October 2024. Initial terms have been obtained by PNC to extend the construction loan maturity to December 31st, 2024, with closing costs estimated at less than $110,000, with all other terms remaining unchanged. While interest rates are expected to decline, staff is evaluating hedging strategies and risks for the variable rate construction and bridge loans during the extended period for benefit of the property. As shown in the table on page 4, cost to close on the extension and carry the property through the extension period is estimated to total $7.7 million, including debt service payments to bondholders on July and January 1st, with partial offset anticipated from projected interim income of approximately $736,000. Staff will return to the commission with a final request before December 2024 to reconcile increased costs to the transaction, as well as any adjustment to the LIHTC equity receivable and other matters. Moving to the last page 5. Therefore, in order to execute on resolving these delays and provide sufficient funds, staff recommends, with support of the Development and Finance Committee, for the commission to approve the actions as recommended. Amendment of the financing plan, extension of the construction loan with PNC to December, amendment of the mortgage loan to extend the date required for permanent conversion to occur by December and thereby delay the start of amortization. Amendment of the bridge loan funded by way of the reloc to increase to $33.7 million and mature in March 31st, 2025, as well as execution of new interest rate hedges for the construction and bridge loans for the extended period. Are there any questions?
I wanted to make a point. I forgot to do this at the committee level. Sometimes when there's a delay, not sometimes, when the equity is delayed coming in, their internal rate of return goes up just by math. I've been able to, in the past, not always, talk to the investor about changing their pricing since their yield went up. I just commend that to your thinking. I don't know who the investor is, if it's Wells Fargo or somebody else, but it might be worth considering that approach since you're 9 months behind, and there's a benefit to them. And if it is Wells Fargo, you're a very good client. I just make that suggestion.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I will recommend that we support the staff's recommendation and approve resolutions 2428A and 2428B.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-28A and 24-28B. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the selection of a construction manager for our Wheaton Gateway development.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, we continue to take strides in moving forward with our Wheaton Gateway development. We are now at the phase where we would like to recommend a construction manager. I will turn it over to Dejana Donahue, the project manager on this initiative or on this development, to provide more details.
Good afternoon, Dejana Donahue, project manager with real estate development. Executive summary. Considering this project has come before the commission during the previous cycle, I will bypass the overview and proceed to the CM criteria 4 slides down. Thank you. RFP 2431 was issued in Q4 of 2023. The scoring team consisted of staff from risk management, mortgage finance, and real estate divisions, as well as a Duffy representative. The proposals were scored on the following 4 evaluation criteria, and the maximum points a proposal could receive is 100. The scoring criteria here is similar to prior CMRPs, which include qualifications, additional MFD participation, references, and price. I would like to add that the development team plans to engage a construction manager and general contractor prior to the start of design development to assist with pricing and constructability guidance, which is why we are seeking the approval of the construction manager at this time. Next slide, please. HOC received 7 proposals in response to RFP 2431. 2 proposals were deemed non-responsive. Here you have the 5 respondents. The first being Fix 360, a certified MBE firm that has prior experience working on HOC scatter sites, but not in the capacity as a GC, but in the capacity as a GC and not a CM. Owner's rep also has experience providing CM services for HOC's renovation projects, such as Bower Park, Georgian Court, and Shady Grove. Third being JDC, also a certified MBE firm that has experience providing CM services for HOC projects, such as the Lindley, Fenton, Silver Springs, Storetown, the Laureate, Willow Manor Properties, and HOC's headquarters project. Lambris Rank has experience providing CM services for HOC projects, such as the Leggett and Hillendale Gateway. And lastly, MLG, a local CM firm that does not have any experience on prior HOC projects. Next slide. Following a review of all the proposals, the scoring team scored JDC the highest with 90 out of 100 points. To summarize the scoring team's evaluation, regarding qualifications, JDC has prior experience, as I mentioned, regarding providing CM services for HOC projects. And within their proposal, they strongly demonstrated their expertise and qualifications. For MFD participation, also as a certified MBE firm, they received full points in this criteria. For references, JDC has performed well on prior HOC projects and for their involvement with change order management and on-time completion. Their proposal included a competitive fee of $1,306,000. Based on the scoring criteria, JDC has demonstrated that they have the skills, team, and expertise to perform construction management services. Staff recommends the approval of JDC for Wheaton Gateway LLC Phase 1 for CM services in that amount, and to include a 15% contingency in the amount of $195,900. This is to cover any unforeseen changes in scope due to the size and duration of the project. The 15% contingency is a standard amongst previously approved CM approvals. Next slide. Thank you. The plan is to bring the approval for the general contractor and the sustainability consultant together during the May-June commission cycle this year. And based on the projected schedule for next year, the commission actions include approval to submit for the building permit, in addition to the approval to execute the GMP with the general contractor. Next slide. Issues for consideration include to approve the selection of JDC to provide construction management services for Wheaton Gateway LLC Phase 1 in the amount of $1,306,000, including a 15% contingency of $195,900. And secondly, to authorize the president/executive director to negotiate and execute a contract with JDC. There is no fiscal impact for this approval, and this is for consideration for today's meeting. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the commissioners? If not, I would make a motion that we support the staff's recommendation and approve resolution 24-29.
I'll second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-29. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ida.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is for the selection of a development consultant for the Forest Glen Metro project. And I'll just make a comment that I made at the committee level. I get very excited about all of our HOC's projects, but I get particularly excited about both the Wheaton and the Forest Glen Metro one, which are both in my neighborhood. So excited to see those. And with that, I will turn it over.
And again, I must second that emotion. And so for the Forest Glen development, we're pleased to advance this project and activate it actually with the recommendation for a development consultant. We did take the feedback that we received from DevFin in terms of ensuring that we were clear in regards to the scope, and I'll turn it over to the staff, Walker Taylor, our financial analyst, who will lead this presentation and proactively address the concerns raised by DevFin previously.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, commissioners. Staff is seeking approval of a development consultant for the entitlement of the entire site, as well as the development and construction of the first phase of the Forest Glen Metro development, and additionally approval of a feasibility budget and related funding. Given the unique characteristics of transit-oriented developments and the large multi-phase nature of this site, HOC could benefit from working with a development consultant that has experience working closely with WMATA. So staff recommends selecting Urban Atlantic as the consultant for the site and to authorize the president to negotiate and execute a contract with Urban Atlantic for the first phase of the development. Staff is also recommending that the president execute a limited notice to proceed to Urban Atlantic under the consultant contract in an amount not to exceed $500,000. Staff is additionally requesting an increase in feasibility funding in the amount of $715,000 to cover 12 months of consultant costs, as well as legal fees and other pre-development soft costs related to the project. Next slide, please. On April 6, 2022, HOC authorized the acting executive director to submit an unsolicited offer to WMATA to redevelop the site and approve funding for feasibility study of the site. Initial concept plan showed the potential for 800 to 1,050 units in 6 proposed buildings. The first phase of the redevelopment is anticipated to produce approximately 431 units. Next slide. So the redevelopment of this site is going to be a multi-phase endeavor. HOC anticipates that each phase will take 3 to 5 years to finance and build. The entire site will be fully developed in 15 to 20 years. The phases are as listed as the entitlement phase, and then phases 1 through 4. HOC will reserve the right under the contract to add or retain additional and or different development consultants for future phases of the redevelopment. Next slide. So HOC solicited proposals from 5 firms within its real estate development and finance consultant pool. The 5 firms were Urban Atlantic, EYA, 5 Squares, Duval, and Forefront. The scope of services requested in task order 2386-1 are as listed. Staff interviewed the 3 top scoring firms out of the 5 firms that submitted responsive proposals. Those firms were Urban Atlantic, EYA, and 5 Squares. Next slide. So a scoring team of HOC real estate development, asset management, and mortgage finance staff scored firms on their proposals on the following 4 evaluation criteria, which were offers qualifications, experience, specifically that in developing high density, mixed income, and mixed use TODs, MFD participation, and price. The maximum points a proposal could receive is 100. Proposals received scores ranging from 66 to 89 points, with Urban Atlantic scoring the highest. The biggest factor that differentiated the firm's scores was price. All firms structured their fee as a percentage of total development costs, with a portion of the fees proposed to be paid in a fixed monthly amount during pre-development. The remainder of their fees would be paid during vertical construction. Urban Atlantic's fee structure includes a fixed monthly fee during pre-development and a vertical fee equal to 4% of total development costs, less pre-development fees paid that will be paid during construction. Additionally, to align interests and create incentives for timely execution, Urban Atlantic proposes a development fee cap during pre-development based on an agreed upon scope of work and timeline. Urban Atlantic is adequately staffed to undertake the additional workload posed by the redevelopment of the Forest Glen Metro. As a 26-year-old development firm, they are well capitalized and able to supplement HOC's staff as the workload changes and grows. Next slide. So all 5 firms submitted proposals covering the entire 5-year span of the initial phase of the site, encompassing both the pre-development and the entitlement phase within this period. As we discussed before, the consultant's scope of work will cover the entitlement phase and phase 1 of vertical construction. During that time frame, staff will return to the commission at multiple points to obtain approval and to continue with redevelopment. These points include, but are not limited to, approval of a pre-development plan and pre-development funding, site plan submission, the final development and financing plan. HOC intends to use its standard form of agreement for services, which permits HOC to terminate the agreement at any time if it determines that the termination is in HOC's best interest. Next slide. So Urban Atlantic had a lot of relevant experience that was comparable to the proposed site with their new Carrollton Metro project standing out to staff. This project broke ground in 2017 and includes 49 transit-oriented acres that will all be a mixed-use and mixed-income employment center and residential community. This development will ultimately result in 1,500 residential units, as well as 1.1 million square feet of offices, 150,000 square feet of retail, and a 200-key hotel that will all be oriented around a bustling transit hub. This development also includes WMATA's new headquarters. Urban Atlantic has a 20-plus year relationship with WMATA, both as a joint development partner and a fee-for-service development. Next slide. So this is a timeline showing action items throughout the first phase of the redevelopment. This begins with the feasibility stage, where commission has already approved feasibility funding in April of 2022 with $183,000 currently available, and we are currently requesting additional funding for this period. The negotiation phase will begin once the commission approves the current request to select Urban Atlantic as the consultant for the site. Then, with the additional money in the feasibility budget, we will continue to explore feasibility of the site with the consultant as well as negotiate their contract. In the pre-development period, we will continue to negotiate a JDA with WMATA as well as come to the commission with a finalized pre-development budget. Finally, in the construction phase, we will begin the construction and come to the commission with a final development plan and budget. Next slide. So this is just showing Urban Atlantic's proposed development timeline. And like I said before, following the approval of Urban Atlantic, staff will build out a finalized timeline and return to the commission with approval of the pre-development budget. Next slide. So to continue exploration of the site and prepare to enter into a JDA with WMATA, staff is requesting additional feasibility funding in the total amount of $715,000, which includes the $50,000 HOC held contingency. This request will be funded as a draw from the OHRF and would be repaid at closing of construction financing should the transaction be consummated. Right, next slide. Let me know if there are any questions.
Just a comment to express appreciation for addressing the comments and questions of the committee during the committee hearing, and making clear that there will be opportunities to determine whether or not to continue at various stages with this development consultant. Doesn't mean that we would determine not to continue. It's a lengthy project. And, we need the flexibility to be able to determine what makes the most sense for HOC at various stages. Are there any other comments or questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I think that the selection of, and the process you went to select this particular company, I think substantiates the value of having the redevelopment pool we have, because we've got the substantial developers that we could draw upon who have the kind of requisite experience to do this kind of complex project. And so I just want to acknowledge that shows the value of what we went through the process of building that pool. I think that's when we did a legal pool earlier, so it just validates that that's the right way to go. I want to acknowledge that.
Are there any other questions? If not, I will make a motion that we support the staff's recommendation and approve resolution 24-30.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-30. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. Motion is passed unanimously.
Thank you.
The final item that came before the committee for the full commission has to do with the selection of a vendor to replace an elevator at the Barclay Apartments.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. You'll hear a presentation related to this request. You'll note that we have done due diligence to try to locate the most cost-efficient approach to we couldn't repair, so we have to replace this elevator at Barclay. And so presenting to you is John Wilhoit, our Vice President of Asset Management, so that we can provide additional details. Just to note, this is also something that will come up in our Dev Corp later in the meeting as well. Yes.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, commissioners. My name is John Wilhoit, Vice President Asset Management. This presentation is related to the approval to select vendor to replace one elevator at Barclay Apartments for the President Executive Director, negotiate and execute a contract for up to $285,445 and approval of the capital expenditure budget. This is an infrastructure modernization project for the elevator in one building at the Barclay. The property was built in 1953. The Barclay Apartments are in Bethesda, Maryland. It's a garden-style multifamily community comprised of 4 buildings with a total of 157 units. and current occupancy of 96%. The purpose of this project, this infrastructure modernization, property requires the immediate replacement of the sole elevator in building 4700, which is inoperable and past its useful life. The request is for the President Executive Director to be authorized to execute a contract on behalf of Action Elevator for $285,445 for the replacement modernization of the inoperable elevator at the property. Repairs were attempted over a 6-week period and deemed impossible due to age, condition, and parts unavailability. Next slide, please. To address the issue, proposals for replacing the elevator in building 4700 were solicited from 3 vendors. The cost provided ranged from $285,445 to $399,287. Next slide, please. Replacement of the elevator is proposed to be funded from the replacement reserve, which as of February 29th has sufficient funds to pay for the replacement. Next slide, please. Staff recommendation and commission actions needed. Staff recommends to the commission that they approve the selection of Action Elevator by utilizing non-competitive proposal procurement pursuant to section 5.6 of the procurement policy to replace the elevator at building 4700 at the Barclay Apartments, and authorize the President Executive Director to negotiate and execute a contract with Action Elevator for a total contract cost of $285,445 plus an HOC held contingency of $42,817 for a total project cost of $328,262, which cost is to be funded from the property's replacement reserve account. Be pleased to answer your questions.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? If not, I will make a motion to support the staff's recommendation and approve resolution 24-31.
I'll second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-31. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
That concludes the Development and Finance Committee items that have been brought before the commission. We will now proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is items requiring deliberation and/or actions. This item deals with the multifamily preservation production related to our preservation activities for naturally occurring affordable housing developments in Bethesda.
Thank you.
So I will turn to our president.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, today, actually, there was a press release that was issued, related to the funding of the Nonprofit Preservation Fund and how it is attempting to address the fact that we are at risk of losing 7,000 to 11,000 unrestricted, naturally occurring affordable housing units in our county by 2030. We are reviewing our entire portfolio and doing so in 3 different ways, kind of categorized by the 3 Ps, looking at our production of additional affordable housing, looking at how we approach preservation, as well as how we leverage various prospects as they become available to us. We previously provided a presentation to the commission as well as the council on how we have fully utilized our housing production fund. And we also continue to provide reports to the board and request support as we move forward to advance our production pipeline. In today's presentation, we'll focus on the preservation activities that have been underway for many years for our agency, how we've been able to utilize our various approaches to leverage our equity and advancements and investments to advance our development and mission. And we'll provide an overview on how this model has worked for us in the past, as well as what preservation development projects we currently have underway in the Bethesda area. I turn it to Zachary Marks, our Senior Vice President of Real Estate, to provide this presentation.
Thank you, President Andrews. For the record, Zachary Marks, Senior Vice President of Real Estate. As President Andrews mentioned, that this presentation is really trying to do a few things. One, to really capture the historical nature of preservation within HOC's history. HOC has many decades, and sometimes those decades have themes. But one of the consistencies throughout for the agency has been its efforts around preservation. It's really in many ways, the backbone of the agency. It's what turned the agency from what it was as a pure play public housing authority at its inception into what it is today, which is among the largest landlords in the county. And so one of the things you can see on the first slide is that sort of spine along the bottom. And really from the outset, HOC was using preservation as a method to grow its portfolio and to protect residents of the county and to be able to serve more of those residents of the county. Initially HOC again was a pure play public housing authority. It initially created most of its portfolio through public housing construction, but almost simultaneously began acquiring MPDUs, scattered site MPDUs. So if you remember from November, our discussion around scattered sites, many of those units were acquired almost concurrently with HOC's initial public housing activities and began expanding the portfolio first as a scattered site acquisition preservation methodology. Many of those were actually new MPDUs. HOC was leveraging its ability to its authority to acquire up to a third of new MPDUs for rental housing. And so it was a way to move almost immediately away from only having public housing as an option for its residents to really creating housing opportunities, throughout the county. One of the things that we saw in the New York Times story was a real appreciation for the fact that folks could live in Potomac, they could live in Silver Spring, they could live in Rockville, and they could live in houses that had yards. They could live in houses that had bedrooms for multiple children. And so, it was really that almost immediately viewed by HOC as central to what it does. So, and then from there, that what you can sort of see as you move through the decades is both an intensification of the preservation effort, beginning with garden style apartments in the 90s, a whole host of them, transitioning into mid-rise and even high-rise acquisition toward the end of the 90s and into the 2000s. And really, but for what I guess we can term as a quiet period in the aughts, you can see that there's really been a steady march through preservation by HOC to the point that 50 to 60% of the portfolio is actually acquired real estate. And so it's really significant to have gone from what was our public housing portfolio to really what built HOC was capturing the opportunity housing brand, was really taking that opportunity housing brand and turning it into to really the backbone of the portfolio. And that's where most of our residents see their opportunities, both voucher holders and renters of other means. So next slide. One of the other things to keep in mind is that we often talk about preservation and new construction as sort of separate actions. Even when we approach the individual opportunities in the coming out of the development division. We often think of these things as really just separate activities. We're building new, nice stuff over here. We're preserving older stuff over here. And they're both important, but they're not really related, except that they really are. And so, HOC's model over the decades has really been to acquire properties, put those properties into stabilized, predictable long-term ownership. But ultimately, along the way, those acquisitions become either reinvestment or redevelopment opportunities. And so what we can see through this retrospective is this continual ability to reinvest and redevelop these assets such that, there is the initial preservation effort that's very important, but that these actions actually create further opportunity along their life cycle. So, So, one of the things to really keep in mind here is that perhaps HOC's greatest strength as an agency is its ability to come in and stabilize properties and to own them for the long term. And the housing finance agency component of HOC is really structured to provide exactly that sort of stable long-term financing that helps us to both preserve assets, but to create value from those assets to reinvest in them. And as you can see at the bottom, there is this natural cycle of reinvestment that happens around, every 15-ish years. And in pursuing that mission, it's also creating what has consistently helped contribute to the budget, which is development and finance fees. Most of those development and finance fees come from the reinvestment in our assets, come from the refinancing and resyndication of our assets. The low-income housing tax credit is really central to that. But it's important to understand that even though when we're acquiring these assets up front, we're often not thinking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, but we eventually get there. And as you'll see over the next few slides, those opportunities do more than just simply preserve the existing inventory, but they've allowed HOC throughout to both balance its budget, to be, to continually be ambitious about what HOC is doing in the county, because it's not, it's not a zero-sum business model that we have. We constantly feel that we can set new goals, set new aspirations, and then go meet them. Next slide. So really the two core ways in which our acquisition opportunities really do more than what we just show in that acquisition pro forma is really the resyndication opportunities, the syndication and resyndication opportunities, the use of low-income housing tax credits to both reinvest in the asset, but also to create fee generation for the agency. So that's one. And the other is really redevelopment. And so you can see two examples of properties that HOC owned for a long time. Were very modest properties. Chevy Chase Lake, if you can even remember it anymore, was 68 units on 5 acres. And we know, and we all know the special community that it's created. Holly Hall was 96 units on the Beltway, and now we're going to come back with 463 units, including more affordable senior units than were there before. And so it's again keeping the context. As we come forward with a discussion about preservation, we really wanted to provide the historical context, because these things do happen very gradually. Many of us are not here either when it first happened or when it will happen. And so, because of the length of time over which these investments mature and blossom, we sometimes don't necessarily make the connection between the two stages. But I think it's important to see that in the table, you're talking about 2,000 units that HOC has reinvested in, has brought new capital into, renovated, and ultimately continues to own and is stabilized and has used to provide affordability that were not here when HOC started. Next slide, please. And so in the previous slide, you saw the use of, the more sort of straightforward use of like, here's an older property that we have more density on now, and we can now build more units where it was. But even when we don't redevelop, these assets that we simply preserve can provide and have provided significant equity toward, often toward mission. So one of the most, I think one of the most pertinent examples is actually the Leggett, which of course we just cut a ribbon on. The Leggett was actually funded from excess proceeds from several different communities. We usually talk about Alexander House because it provided more of that funding than any of the other properties. Again, long-term ownership of Alexander House, paid our mortgage, building appreciates, maintained, and even while maintaining affordability and then putting 25 million more into a renovation, we had built up so much equity in Alexander House that we were able to take excess proceeds and put them toward a building that, because of the mission that it was attempting to achieve, had a gap, and we were able to fill that with uncapitalized equity rather than having to use our own cash resources or having to have our hand out. And but it's also important to know that when we entered into our original RAD strategy, when we started with some of the renovations in the early part of RAD, which we wound up spending a decade in converting our public housing portfolio. But even from the beginning, we knew that we were renovating the properties that had good bones and could be put back into use, but just needed reinvestment. But we knew that the excess proceeds from those properties were ultimately going to go toward the Leggett at the end. And indeed, that's what happened. So our COLA, Waverly, and the RAD 6 all contributed additional dollars toward making the Leggett a reality. Next slide, please. As President Andrews mentioned at the top, there was a 2020 study by the planning department that identified that 7,000 to 11,000 naturally occurring affordable units would be lost by 2030. And it also looked at individual submarkets. And in Bethesda, of the naturally occurring affordable housing in Bethesda, only 20% of those units are actually of affordable housing in Bethesda total is under restriction. So that means 80% of the affordable housing in Bethesda is in fact naturally occurring affordable housing, which is another way of saying completely unrestricted and completely vulnerable. And so one of the priorities that we placed on acquisition over the last 5 to 7 years has been on really making a concerted effort to focus on preservation in Bethesda, where they said, you can't, and they often, at least back then, they said, you can't preserve in Bethesda. It's too expensive. How do you do it? And that simply was not something that made sense to us. HOC has had a position in Bethesda for a long time, including the Metropolitan, which was once the flagship asset of HOC. It continues to be a really lovely building that nobody ever thinks HOC owns. And so it had, several holdings. The two core ones were really Metropolitan and Barclay, but we felt that could be substantially expanded. And when we saw that the 20%, which is preserved or which is restricted in Bethesda, of which most of which is ours already, that we really prioritize Bethesda. And so part one of that was the buyback of the limited partnership interest for the Metropolitan, so we could reinvest in that, also triggering our purchase option on Westwood Tower. Next slide. And so with adding Westwood Tower to our actually owned units, even though we controlled it through a master lease, and buying back the LP interest for Metropolitan, we had secured what we already had within our portfolio for those next phases. And we started looking for opportunities to expand our holdings in Bethesda. Originally, the Bradley Crossing properties, which are 7 buildings scattered across 3 sites. Originally, this was a conversation with all the management about co-development. Originally, we were looking at combining the properties, particularly the ones next to the Barclay, and doing a redevelopment together. They had a leadership change and a business. They changed to a professional board from a family-driven company, and decided that instead they wanted to diversify. Almost all their holdings were either in DC or Bethesda, and they wanted to diversify, and so they moved to a disposition. And of course, these are highly redeveloped. Even if you don't include the Barclay, these are sites that are ripe for redevelopment, have no restrictions. And in fact, many of these units are already gone as affordable. What we found when we acquired the Bradley Crossing is that in fact, even though the units are affordably priced, most of the people that live there wouldn't qualify for them. Most of the families that live there make somewhere between 80 and 120% of AMI. So in reality, those units were already gone. So when the commission decided to buy it, and with a directive to put 20% of the units to 50% AMI as soon as possible, which we've now done, there are now 81 50% AMI restricted units at the property today. And that's a major achievement. It's the BCC high school cluster. And this is obviously the CBD where you have access to all the amenities and transit and parks and so forth that Bethesda has to offer. And so it was a real achievement. And it was a part of a very specific vision that these units were at high risk of either being bought and having those rents raised, because if you're in there at 80 to 120% AMI, but the rents are set at 60, 65% AMI, you can raise those rents almost immediately, right? And then secondly, as you can see, we were already thinking of redeveloping with Alden when it was a joint development. So these are, you don't find many 3, 4, 5 acre low density sites in Bethesda that have, that got upzoned and are now serious redevelopment candidates. Under HOC's ownership, that redevelopment will happen at some point, but it'll happen in a way that doesn't create displacement, which is of course the concern, and it will also make sure that there's no net loss. Next slide. So in terms of how that's gone, there were key strengths, things that attracted us to acquiring these units from Alden. One, it is not ordinary to acquire units where the company that's selling it to you has owned those units for every day those units have been in existence, and that family is local, and that family had not owned, the entity didn't own those assets with a sense that they weren't going to, they had a finite horizon on them. So one of the things that attracted us to these assets is that while they were on the older side, which is true of a lot of the Bethesda inventory, we knew we were working with a group that had always treated these assets as if they were going to own them forever, because while they didn't get to forever, they got through about 50 years. And so those sorts of family-owned companies, multi-generational companies, take better care of their units because they know they're the ones that are likely going to be fixing it in 10 years. And so beyond just the preservation mission and the obvious risk of the assets, there was also a clear advantage to purchasing units that for which we really had a good sense of their condition and their operation. And so one of the things, so those things have largely panned out. So in terms of operational expenses and in terms of CapEx, the properties have performed exactly as we've hoped. They've needed very little in the way of CapEx, and for the most part, we have been able to rely on the operating expense performance. And so the challenges that have arisen as part of Bradley had to do with a few things. One, and I would say most prominently, is that there were about 2.5 years of discussions with DHCA around a HIF loan that was supposed to have come in. And that was problematic for a few reasons. One, there was confusion around how much affordability, what the affordable program was going to be. And because of that confusion and the delays around implementing that, so even so, when you're trying to do this organically, so you're not displacing any residents, the idea was every next vacant unit turns into a 50% AMI unit. And then at the time, the agreement with DHCA was that there would also be a component, there'll be a 30% component at 80% AMI. And so when you're converting 50% of the property, you are not raising the rents you're not getting mark to market on any market rate units for 2.5 years. And so part of this really stemmed from the confusion around, frankly, a DHCA administration at the time that we simply couldn't execute with. And fortunately, there's new leadership over there. We have agreements in place, and so we'll be putting HIF loans in place on both of these properties within the next few months. And there's now clarity around the affordability and so forth. But certainly one of the lessons learned for us was, around making sure that we have, that we have really written commitments in place from DHCA. We know exactly what's going to happen around funding when it's supposed to happen, and that we're able to, and that we're accounting for the installation period of the affordable, because it was really important to get the 20 at 50 in there and any additional affordability in there. But it does take time because we're not kicking anybody out to do that. And I think the other piece is that at the time, because these assets had been owned for 50 years by one family organization, it was our sense that to provide comfort to the residents, that we keep the same property management company in place, which was Alden Management at the time, because they had managed the properties for 50 years. It gave us a transition period, and it was our feeling that this was the preference of the residents who had by and large have had good experiences under them. And unfortunately, there wasn't as much familiarity with managing the installation of affordability, qualifying tenants. And so that certainly had a lot to do with it. So going forward, I think the priority really has to be placed on having management in place that really understands how to get the affordability there timely. And the next slide. So battery was really a continuation of this idea. Battery, in fact, was originally presented to us as all 5 properties within one preliminary plan approval. So Alden had actually taken 5 properties, A, B, C, D, E, through preliminary plan approval, but ultimately felt that they wanted to continue with entitling C and D, but that A, B, and E, they were ready to talk about disposition. And in fact, these were properties that the county executive has talked about extensively about preserving, because of the approvals under the current preliminary plan do not replace the existing count of affordable units. So again, mission was there, and all of the other strengths that were there for the Bradley the Bradley acquisition were common here. Next slide. So once again, the consistency around and clarity around operating expenses and CapEx bore out. So these were properties that operated as we thought they would, and it once again did not need much capital expense reinvestment at the front end. Fortunately, by the time we got to battery, we knew that there was a problem with DHCA, and so there has not been the same level of impact that there was to Bradley for battery. So fortunately, we haven't had that same level of impact, but at the same time, the HIF loan delay on both properties has forced HOC to have to use its this real estate line of credit for longer than it thought. Rates went up, and so that's become more of a burden on these properties. Putting the HIF loans in place on both these properties will save about $350,000 combined for FY25. And so, that's certainly hurt until now, but we will get that done here in the next few months. Next slide. And then just briefly, there is we have a very small property, Fairfax Court, at the very southern edge of the CBD. And so that is a property we will potentially look at for sort of what's next on that property. It's a 1960s era property. It's only 18 units and very similar to our scattered site portfolio. Needs renovation, but doesn't really have the ability on its own to generate the normal equity resources to provide that renovation. Again, it's also on the edge of the CBD, so there's really not much else to do here other than to continue to operate 18 units as a rental property. So this is a property that we'll come back with some thoughts on, analysis on in the over the next few months. Next slide. So most importantly, we also wanted to convey, because most of the time you are seeing stuff on a project by project basis, it's out of context. There's, it's often without sort of the big picture. And so we're also providing here really a total summary of the recapitalization strategies from all of our properties. Bethesda, within Bethesda, also providing that re-syndication schedule around upcoming LIHTC projects. And we also have Cider Mill on here for its sheer size. But we wanted you to also have a reference sheet that gave a quick sense of where each of these properties is going directionally from a strategic standpoint. Happy to answer questions, hear comments, but we wanted to just really start out by giving a retrospective and a status on our preservation portfolio. Thank you.
So given that background, what do you think is the next item that we should be looking for coming to the commission as a result of the next steps of this process?
Yeah, so I think in closed session we have a couple of items, but I would say that with, as President Andrews mentioned at the top, in addition to the advent of the Housing Production Fund, which was $100 million of completely new money available to HOC, there's also recently the creation of the Nonprofit Preservation Fund, which is also brand new available money to both nonprofits and HOC. And so, we do think that money provides a really low cost, low resource opportunity to continue to build on our Bethesda strategy, but also to really take our preservation strategy in a very targeted way to other parts of the county. And so those three strategies that we've used are to really preserve more at scale, as opposed to some of these smaller acquisitions. Obviously, there are times and places for these very tiny properties, but really HOC is one of the few entities that can actually preserve these larger properties. As we've seen that many of these properties actually provide an aggregation opportunity and make properties we already own more valuable, like the Barclay. The Barclay is on 2 acres, and it's like a triangle site. It's a very difficult site to redevelop by itself. But with this acquisition, it's now an 8-acre site in downtown Bethesda. And then continuing to leverage our relationships, we're able to, as we've demonstrated, we sometimes use the right of first refusal, but we do not always use the right of first refusal. We often use relationships. So we think there are really targeted opportunities outside of Bethesda. But the first thing we want to do, I think, is populate our share of the Nonprofit Preservation Fund. And so we have one item to introduce in closed session, as well as a comment on another Bethesda holding of ours in the closed session. So
when we started out with the Housing Production Fund, we had already identified targeted projects that we knew we could use that money for and use it quickly. So the Preservation Fund is a smaller pool initially starting off. And so I don't want to jump the gun here, but do we have a similar kind of prospect list for the Preservation Fund?
We do.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for the presentation. Have a few comments and general comments and questions. But I think you've really highlighted a lot of the benefits of our preservation strategy. And then particularly speaking about Bethesda, I want to note that preservation, the expansion and preservation of affordable housing is part of our strategic plan, but it's not just the preservation and expansion. It's doing so in areas of opportunity. And Bethesda is clearly, one of the bigger, more important areas of opportunity in the county. And so making sure that there is affordable housing available to, low-income residents in those areas is critically important. And, I think the fact that, you noted that a lot of, it's great to be able to live in a low-cost unit, but it's even more important for us to, put restrictions on those units to make sure that they're available to the folks who need them most. And so, I just want to highlight that. Also want to, kind of touch on something that you talked about. And the importance of, holding on to some of these properties and the benefits that provides, to the rest of our mission, again, to expand affordable housing elsewhere, our ability to leverage those properties, that we've held for a while. And, I was thinking about it some in terms of, we've had these discussions about potential disposition. And I know, there are some properties that may be appropriate for disposition, but this also highlights the benefit of really holding onto those properties, and that, disposition is not the only way that we can take advantage of these properties to, gain access to capital that can be used for other developments. One thing that you didn't touch on that, for me, I think about, and that isn't often thought about with the benefits of preservation, is the benefits to climate. And, we have done a lot to focus on, our new developments being very green and climate friendly. But, I heard somebody once say that the greenest house is an existing house, because, you're not using all the resources that, even when you create a very energy efficient home, you've used a lot of energy to develop that property. So, there is that benefit to preservation as well. All of that said, and going back to the numbers that I highlighted earlier about, the gap in available affordable housing to, very low, extremely low income residents, there is a time when redevelopment becomes appropriate. And I guess, the question I had was just, what are the considerations, for us in terms of when it becomes appropriate for us to, redevelop rather than just preserve?
Yeah, and I would add to that HOC's portfolio is of a size now where, and our credibility is such with the private sector that we almost have, we have the existing portfolio, and there are opportunities in that portfolio that, there's 100 years of work in there. And so adding to that opportunities in the private sector, we can't do all of that at once. And so being selective about those, it's another strength of the preservation approach, is that while you're waiting, you still have a productive asset, you still are meeting mission. And so one of the nice things is that when we acquire and we get it into stable financing, most of our preservation activities do not put pressure on us to have to redevelop to make it all make sense. But, I would say that, in general, we want to preserve. And while there may be some of these acquisitions are large enough where there may be a component that could go into an immediate redevelopment. So as an example, on Battery Lane, we bought Site B, happens to be next to the oldest, smallest parking deck in Bethesda. So something like that, maybe, you can get at right away, because there's kind of it's a Site B is relatively small, so you're impacting fewer residents. So it's those kinds of ideas, like what presents the least impactful, what provides us the most flexibility around making sure that residents who are going to go through this, get the value out of it that we develop for them, but also allow us to handle that. So, when we did the Lindley, we gave everybody the right to return, but there was, at the time, there was no obvious place to have folks sort of move to in the interim and then come back. And the reality is, and it was a lesson learned for me and for us, that the reality is, if folks move away, even if they have the right to return, people move on. They don't want to move again. They've built a life somewhere else. And so, these larger opportunities provide us with the opportunity to absorb existing families into the same community and create those. So I think it's creating opportunities that are not disruptive. It often, it is often easier to, when we acquire these properties not new, but acquire them anew, we've bought them at current pricing. And one of the benefits to HOC is often, owning it for a while and letting the equity build and letting the debt be paid off. And so, as we've seen, some of our best redevelopment opportunities are the properties that we've owned for a really long time. Chevy Chase Lake was a perfect example of that. So I think we want to think about resident disruption and how we can best manage it. Is there an opportunity adjacent that is suddenly available? We really got to take advantage of it. And I think, but ultimately, I think acquiring properties, letting them season, having the basis be paid down, it creates a better ultimately an acquisition number within the redevelopment budget. So I think those are some of the key factors we look at.
I'll just jump in here too. The other considerations are there any financing restrictions? For example, we have certain properties, cider mill, et cetera, where there's a lockout period before we can even begin any development. So we're looking at our financing options. We're looking at if there's been any changes in zoning in those various sites. If it's been upzoned, there might be a great opportunity. If there's new development coming to that area, and we believe that repositioning ourselves and even leveraging that new development as a build first site might be beneficial for us. It's something we're looking at. We're always taking a hard look at the costs for repairs. And when those costs for repairs feel as though we're just going to be endlessly paying into a maintenance fund versus a redevelopment fund, we're having to reevaluate and present to the board the options in terms of continued preservation versus a redevelopment strategy. So those are some of the other ways we approach looking at our assets.
Thank you. I very much appreciate this sort of global look at the issue and the historical retrospective. I think both of those are very helpful to educate us for decision making. And I think you did a very good job of highlighting some of the success stories we've had. I want to follow up a little bit on what Chelsea was just describing. In the past few months, heard one of MHP's executives talking about the preservation issues in the county, saying buying them is the easy part, that dealing with the maintenance and rehab is the hard part of this. And I know even where we've had big future opportunities to look at, we've run into issues like just the cost to demolish the Ambassador in order to get ready for Gateway turned in to be quite something. And then cider with the roofs that we're having to replace one by one by one before we can get to redevelopment. Do you have, I'm assuming that finance or asset management has looked at these properties on this chart that you have here. Can you give us this same chart with what the projection was of the first 10 years maintenance or rehab costs and then what they actually turned out to be, so that we have a sense from our own experience of what the reality of that risk is? Because I see a lot of people wanting us to take on these buildings, and I understand why. We do a good job with them. And they're willing to help us buy them. But I think the executive from MHP was quite right. That's the easy part. Dealing with what comes after buying them is the challenge. So I would love whatever data we already have in-house on our own projects and what we thought at the time we bought them and what reality turned out to be, just to be part of this education process for us.
We can surely do that. I think in addition to looking at expense, it might be that various properties were more successful in terms of how rent has increased over time. So there's so many factors, or even the equity that might have either gone up or down in comparison to what was initially projected. But we can definitely go back and look at where we started with these various properties, where we are now. I think to have a full picture, we should kind of look at not just the maintenance component of it, but the income as well as the equity. So we're having a full picture of how that asset has performed. And we
That
can
would be
provide
great.
that.
And then how long it took us to lock in the affordability and at what rates
Right.
might be interesting as well.
Sounds
Not to create a massive project. I mean,
Right.
I'm literally hoping this data exists so that it's not a massive project. If it is, we can rethink the scope of what I'm asking for. But I think that would be a nice addition to the history that you've put together here.
I would say one of the things that comes across very clearly is the fact that the property we did acquire, one of the factors was looking at what our capital costs were going to be in the early years of the acquisition. So we thought that we could have a stabilized property that could operate just from the revenues coming from rental income. That we didn't look at the large capital outlays, which really can expedite the requirements for redevelopment, because you're spending more money than you're actually generating and stabilizing property. The other interesting thing about it is the fact is that, in looking at the objective of this is to preserve affordable housing, affordability. And in some cases, a redevelopment strategy could take you away from that strategy, meaning you could end up with less units than you're preserving, depending upon how you go about the redevelopment. And that's been something I've heard a lot of complaints about coming from county, is that we have spent money investing in some acquisitions that end up costing us more, because we ended up with less units than what we had, we're trying to save. And so I think we've looked at that and said and going forward, that will certainly be a pressure that we look at and do that. And how do we capture and when do we use the value? I mean, zoning is changing all over the country, changing here, and so there's a tendency on owners when you get more evaluation on land to want to sell it to capture the immediate value, and I kind of think about what's happening in the commercial market right now. Major buildings downtown selling for 20% of what they were built for. Okay, and so that can easily happen. While it's in commercial now, that same thing could happen in situations where you have very high density properties that are residential, where you're not continuing to invest in them. So I think we've done a good job, and we've been fortunate enough that we haven't bitten off more than we can chew in a way. Okay, and so that should continue to be the way we look at it, because we don't want to get overexposed to becoming acquisition artists. That's not what our game is. Okay, and it is driven by affordability and how we sustain it long term. We've done a good job of that.
Zach, if the presentation was excellent, Chelsea, it was excellent. Since the recent acquisitions, that 20% figure, Zach, you referenced, what do you think that is now? That's now locked up with some sort of affordability.
Yeah, so on Bradley Crossing, the 20 at 50 is fully installed. So those 81 units are in place. Once we, as I sort of noted, once we got the then property management company, as you all know, they're now under the management for residential 1. So that's since changed. But once we got our sea legs over there, they were able to install that in about, I think about 9 or 10 months. It just took us a little while to help them through that process and get it started and rolling. So that's fully in. And then I think we're about 10% in on battery. We wanted to make sure we had the HIF agreement in place before we really got started on battery, given what happened on Bradley. But there it's, I think 43 units. And so I would anticipate certainly within the calendar year, all 43 will be there. And so that'll be, it's 124, 50% AMI units in Bethesda by the end of the year, I would say.
So the 20% number, when you finish, if everything goes along according to plan, would 30% of the naturally occurring affordable housing have restrictions? 40%? Just a guess. I mean, I'm not holding it to it.
Yeah, sorry. So and so we haven't brought we'll bring now that we have the HIP loan agreements with DHCA, we will be bringing those. But what we've agreed upon is with them to bring to you is 20 at 50 and then 10 at 70. So each property will have 30% affordable, 20 at 50, 10 at 70 during the interim period. And then as part of this agreement, as Chair Priest referenced, we'll also have a no net loss provision that on redevelopment that whatever the current inventory is will be maintained in redevelopment. So 30% during hold and 1 for 1 on redevelopment.
So if we were to, what do you think the number would be to acquire the naturally occurring affordable housing in Bethesda, the balance of it that doesn't have restrictions? Is there any rough estimate? Hundreds of millions? Is there any sort of analysis? I know it's not realistic for us to acquire it, but generally, then you reference the whole county, of course, has the same issue. But in Bethesda, what would you surmise?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, because I know Chelsea and Kieran get nervous when I start calculating in my head, but we did do a preservation or analysis a couple of years ago around the NPPF. So let me dig that up. We do have back of the envelope calculation on
what's NPPF
county. I'm sorry, the Nonprofit Preservation Fund. Here we go with the alphabet soup.
Thank you. And I've lived the alphabet soup. You think I'd know it already?
Wow, they're always figuring out something new. So we can pull that presentation out. There is a rough calculation on the county's entire inventory. And then what we did is I think we calculated what it would take to preserve the 7,000 to 11,000 that are at risk before 2030. Mm-hmm.
But is it fair to say that the PPF and the 100 million isn't enough over time to satisfy to acquire enough of those assets to keep them affordable?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't recall the total number we got to off the top of our head. We think based on where the budget is, the NPPF, the Nonprofit Preservation Fund, will be at 50 million as of July 1. So it's a pretty good start, but certainly needs to be larger to drop in
the bucket, right? And, yep. And the 100 million is fabulous, but it's not enough. So where does the money come from, do you think?
So I think it does come from proving out funds like this and then, really expanding them. The Nonprofit Preservation Fund, though, as you know, 75% of it is available for nonprofits. So I think that also helps with scalability on the acquisition side. As Commissioner Priest said, we cannot do all of that ourselves and still do all the other things we're doing. So I do think, proving out that fund and scaling it. We've had a lot of other conversations that the structure of that fund is one that really works to attract private capital. It is really designed to be matched with private capital. So I think getting the nonprofits involved, getting private capital in as sort of, so where you're combining the Nonprofit Preservation Fund with the private capital does help to leverage that fund. And then ultimately it comes from other strategies that allow us to somehow increase capacity to do more. But I think right now, the most important thing we can do, like we did with the HPF, is to prove the concept, show success and demonstrate to the county and ultimately to the state and even the federal government that this is a good place to put resources.
And so you mentioned the tremendous buildup of equity in your portfolio. These properties that are listed here, could you identify for us, not now, but so that we have more information, what the equity is built up at today's market, conditions in each of these properties? Just, it would be an estimate, but it'd be interesting to know what those resources, that built up equity is in each of the properties. At Fairfax Court, wasn't it earlier in the presentation, there was something that would actually sell for a decent amount, notwithstanding that it's only 18 units.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that.
That would be great, just to know what you're dealing with, because it's a remarkable accomplishment that HOC has made over time. But with the tremendous needs, just in Bethesda, forget the whole county, it would be interesting to know what the built-up equity is in the portfolio. When you sell Fairfax, would you be selling it as a market job, or would you put restrictions on it for the buyer?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be up to you and your colleagues. So we will just let you know what it looks like. And I know the commission, has approached it both ways in the very few times that there have been dispositions in my 11 years. But sometimes it does put restrictions on as part of the sale to make sure that any existing affordability continues. And it may also have to do with the buyer as well. So, for instance, at Emeryville Village in Camp Hill Square, that's a redevelopment where we need, we're, as opposed to just selling to another holder, where we wanted to make sure we built in the equivalent of no net loss. So,
and I was going to mention that you're selling something with very definite idea of what you want to be there ultimately, and the restrictions in place.
Yep.
So something can be sold with restrictions, and you can control that process. Also, when you sell to yourself, there's an unrelated party that has to be involved, right? And does some of the economics go to that party, or at least broadly speaking?
No, we've been pretty successful at keeping that. But it definitely has taken some work. And I know that particularly Paige and Asha have had to, had to help us out a lot on that as well, because the related party issue is definitely something that shows up in our re-syndications and our redevelopments, our renovations.
Maybe what I could, or with the commission, just to understand that better without getting too much in the weeds. But I do know the issue, and it can be needed. A real pain to work around.
Yes.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. It's remarkable what HOC is accomplished. And I used to live in Bethesda. You'd have no idea that HOC was maybe the primary residential multifamily landlord. If that was true in most urban areas around the country, that the local housing authority was the primary owner, there'd be a lot of discomfort probably. That housing authorities don't always manage things so well. So it's really quite a feather in everyone's collective cap. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I want to make one last point before we move on. A couple maybe. One is the fact that it goes back to the earlier history where Lindley is located now. And I drove down that street, and the Lindley is actually shadowed by the other investments that have been made in redevelopment. I mean, before the Lindley was standing out, I could see it right there. That's a Lindley. But now so much mass has been built around that, and even retail. It's interesting. So my point I want to make is that when we talk about one development, and the things we've been talking about in terms of preservation redevelopment, is the fact that the other thing is that we generate other kinds of redevelopment that generate additional revenues that come back to the county, that gives the county additional capital to be able to finance preservation funds. And so when we make these decisions, it's not just a one-off thing. It is the fact that it may make sense that we do it because of the fact of what it's going to be a generator. And that ultimately ends up creating more affordability, because all of those new developments being built also are going to build you additional units. Okay. So I think that's just another piece of it. I was really like, oh, that's powerful. The other thing that I want to just make a point is that as we have been asking you all for a lot of additional information, let us know when to expect that. So that we're not looking that next week you're going to give it to us. Okay. I mean, I think it's got to be a mutual understanding that what we ask, you have to have the capacity to prepare.
Tomorrow would be good. Tomorrow would be great.
So, yeah, and so just let us know when, in fact, we could expect that we would be able to come back. It's taken some time to get this presentation together and of value, and it takes time to put together quality presentations to try to anticipate what we may be asking. So I'm just want to put it back to you all.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will follow back up with the board and the commission in regards to making sure I got all the notes so that we know what part 2 of this should look like, and then set expectation in terms of reasonableness and timeline to produce that. So thank you for raising that, Mr. Chair.
I would also point out that maybe the most important thing, Zach said, hold on a second, I'm in a hotel. Just leave me be, please. Thank you.
We will.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I'm at a hotel and someone was knocking on the door. Thank you. I'm on a Zoom. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I got something complimentary. Something complimentary does not mean it's free. It just means it's at no additional charge.
This is getting a little rancid here.
Sorry about that. That was unexpected. The most important thing Zach said, I thought, was it's not a zero-sum game. And that any one property isn't in a vacuum. It affects the agency and the community in its entirety. Whether you redevelop it or you do something else with the property, it affects something else in HOC and may generate other resources, financial or otherwise. And that's something that we should look at as a commission. That, you know, if we take an action in a certain direction, it isn't just per se a positive or negative in that context in a vacuum. It has other positive or negative implications elsewhere. And that was really, Zach, I thought the most important point you made.
Thank you all for your presentation. One last point.
Yeah.
We're going to end it after this, okay?
Yeah, something very quick. I just wanted to comment quickly on a couple of things. One, Zach, and related to what Zach and Roy said, regarding sort of preservation versus redevelopment. And, you know, I think it is important to note that, like, when we add restrictions, you know, we may be ensuring that, you know, on naturally occurring affordable housing, that it may be that we're actually expanding the number of actual low-income residents who are benefiting from those properties. And also, as Roy noted, if there's additional development that when we do redevelopment, if there's additional development that follows, that may add to the affordable housing stock as well. But in terms of, I think when we do redevelopment, regardless of any of that, I feel very strongly that it should not be just a no net loss, but it should be an expansion of available affordable housing units. So not just one-to-one. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation that drove this conversation. And this, in fact, improves the richness of doing work that sort of gives you a macro look. And we are always now looking at the micro. Okay. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the next item under this deliberation and action. And this is the presentation by the president of the budget is being recommended to the commission for 25.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. And also just taking stock of the time, I'm going to be as brief as I can with my remarks. As we prepare for the FY25 recommended budget, you know that we do so in a number of touch points with the board. I've provided an overview in regards to how we have positioned ourselves with this year's budget. And as we prepare for the implementation of our next 5-year strategic plan, I'm pleased to recommend a budget that I believe is, and we believe is comprehensive, provides thorough information, is most importantly balanced. The budget does reflect our 3-pronged approach of expanding affordable housing, enhancing the lives we touch through supportive services and resources, and excelling as a world-class organization. And in the materials that I provided, I was clear to share that we are still moving out of the impacts of COVID-19, but we are doing so with all deliberate speed. We have deployed every resource we can and anticipate that while we make our way through FY25, that we will be in a much better position by the end of the fiscal year. I also just want to acknowledge, because we have an opportunity when we talk about our budget moving forward to reflect on the accomplishments that we've had to date. It is an exciting year for us, and FY25 will be celebrating our 50 years as an agency. So today's presentation was another spotlight on the great work our agency has done over the years, and also acknowledging our 25 years of our nonprofit. In both of those celebrations should occur in the fall. Also in 25, we'll have some key milestone developments. Our HQ will be well underway and hit major milestones, Building B, as well as the Lumina and the Radia at Hillendale Gateway in Garnkirk Square. So we have a lot going on. We definitely continue to invest in how we can leverage technology, how we can support our staff through training, as well as provide and enhance the customer service that we provide to our customers. And so we are excited about charting our course for FY25. I will turn it over to our budget officer, Terry Fowler, to provide an overview on our recommended budget for FY25.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, commissioners, viewing public and staff. For the record, I'm Terry Fowler, the budget officer at HOC. The budget we're presenting tonight as the president's FY25 recommended budget includes an operating budget of approximately $348.4 million and a capital budget of approximately $339 million, nearly $690 million in aggregate. With a budget of this size and complexity, it's easy to focus on individual aspects such as funds, numbers, and narrative. But we want to point out that with this budget at its size and breadth, our economic impact on the county cannot be understated. We make a difference. This budget seeks to address the numerous challenges such as interest rates and inflation that the agency will face, but also affords us with many opportunities to accomplish our mission. We look forward to providing you tonight with an overview of the recommended budget. And in the coming weeks, we'll be providing more detailed presentations and a budget book. For the flow of events, as I mentioned, we'll go over highlights of the recommended budget this evening. We are not asking for any action at this time. At or around April 10th, we will be releasing the budget book. On April 19th, we'll meet with the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee regarding the general fund and public fund budgets, as well as an overview of HOC reserves. We'll come back again on May 10th, and we'll meet with the BF&A committee regarding mortgage finance, real estate, and the Opportunity Housing Reserve Fund. And finally, on June 5th, we'll present the budget as amended during those meetings for approval. We do want to mention that we are working on the budget book. We want to make sure that we incorporate all the impacts of all the development that is happening, as well as the new strategic plan that is going in place. And we look forward to presenting that to you next week. If we go to page 188 of our budget packet. We have to go back a few slides, page 188. One more. Thank you. You will notice that our budget is comprised of both operating and non-operating income. Grants make up approximately 45% of the budget, or $157.4 million. It's worth noting that the majority of that is the housing assistance payment subsidy received by HUD for payments to landlords in the county, and that's approximately $127.1 million. County funding accounts for another $12.3 million, or 3.54%. Another 31.2%, or $108.7 million of our revenue is generated by our properties. The balance of the operating income is made up of primarily of management fees. And then on the non-operating income, that is where you see interest income on our bonds, as well as transfers between fund as our budget is adopted by funds. Moving to the next page on 189, on the expense side, the composition is about 89%, or $256.5 million operational. Again, HAP makes up about 36.2% of our expense side, or $126.2 million. The non-operating expenses are comprised of debt service, contributions to reserves, various transfers, restrictions of cash from grants in our properties, and the development corporation fees, which is the mechanism of taking the cash flow that is unrestricted from our development corporation properties. If we move to page 190, this shows the restricted and unrestricted revenue in our budget. Of the 348.4 million in revenue, approximately 33.4 million or 9.59% is available for discretionary spending. The restrictions are either grant or bond requirements, debt service or replacement reserves, or internal requirements to cover the cost of operating and maintaining our properties. I do want to note that you will see on the transfers, thank you. Excuse me. We are balancing the recommended budget with a draw from our general fund operating reserve, which is based on the continuing lingering effects of COVID-19. But we do have the teams in place to move us out, out of those impacts. If we move to page 191 of the packet, we're all choked up. The capital budget for fiscal 25 is approximately $339 million. That's comprised of $9.9 million on our improvements on our facilities, information technology, and properties, and $329.1 million for the capital development project costs in fiscal 25. The charts on page 192 and 193 show the distribution of the sources and uses in our capital. However, unlike the operating budget, which does not change much in distribution, the capital budget can fluctuate greatly depending on the nature of the development projects in that particular year. As mentioned earlier, we will be having 2 meetings with the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee over the next 2 months. During these meetings, we will discuss and provide updates for any revisions that occur before bringing the 25 proposed budget to you for adoption in June. And to assist in your review process, we'll be making the recommended budget book in the form of a PDF document available to the commission and senior staff next week. The book will also be published both on the HOC intranet and website. The book is our continued efforts to provide a high level of fiscal and operational transparency. And we look forward to addressing your questions in the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that overview of the proposed budget for 2025. I want to encourage fellow commissioners that while a lot of the focus of the discussion will go on the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee, to please turn in and participate online in those meetings so that you can get, you're not waiting until the full commission meeting to get a briefing on what it is. So I'm saying, so you can do it remotely and participate in the meeting. So I encourage you to do that. Are there any
Roy,
questions?
Roy, I'm going to be the very first to acknowledge I have no idea how HOC's budget works, and don't understand it. Is there a way we could have a beginner's version of how the budget works and the operating and non-operating for some of us who are clueless? Chelsea, is that something we could do?
Yes, and definitely we can also pull the orientation materials. We will definitely spend and go back and refresh materials to just orient on the budget process.
I greatly appreciate it. And maybe others would benefit too, but thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. We look forward to a lot of hard work ahead, and also just to acknowledge the fact I know how much work goes into preparing that budget briefing document. So I know you're going to spend a lot of sleepless nights now for the next couple of weeks. So thank you. We will now move forward on the agenda. Can I get a motion to recess the meeting in order to convene the Development Corporation meetings?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We will now convene the Development Corporation meetings that are listed on the agenda. The development corporations are entities that are wholly controlled by HOC and own various properties. For each development corporation, the board of directors is comprised of the HOC commissioners, and the officers are the same as the officers of the commission. On January the 10th, 2024, 5 development corporations met to approve various matters. These same corporations are meeting today to approve the minutes from the January 10th, approve selecting a property management company, and approve other procurement matters. I now call the meeting of the Berkeley Department Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. The first item before the board is the procurement of property management services. I turn the presentation over to the president.
Thank you. Both Vice President Ali Ozair as well as Vice President John Wilhoit will present matters related to this particular corporation. Thank you.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to present staff's recommendation to select Residential 1 as a property management agent for the Berkeley Development Corporation. The current contract is set to expire on June 30th, 2024 with Residential 1. The new management contract will result in an increase in management fees of $2,736. Due to the proposal assuming 100% occupancy, the new contract will be effective on July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026, with 2 one-year options for renew. Staff recommends the Board of Directors of Berkeley Development Corporation approve the new property management contract with Residential 1. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-002 BC?
I moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. The second item before the board is procurement of a vendor to replace the elevators at the property. I turn the presentation over to the staff.
Hi, John Wellhite, Vice President, Asset Management. This is with respect to infrastructure modernization of a single elevator at the Berkeley. Approval to select vendor to replace 1 elevator at Berkeley Apartments for the President or Executive Director to negotiate and execute a contract for $285,445 and approve the capital budget expenditure. The purpose is for the property requires the immediate replacement of a sole elevator in building 4700, which is inoperable and past its useful life. To address the issue, proposals for replacing the elevator in building 4700 were solicited from 3 vendors. The cost provided ranged from $285,000 to $399,000. The replacement of the elevator is proposed.
Excuse me, since we discussed all of this previously in our open session.
We did.
We don't need to repeat all of that.
Certainly.
Okay, that can just move to a motion.
Please.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-003 BC?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered.
Thank you.
With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call to order. I can't read this. The
Oaks at 4 Corners.
Oaks at 4 Corners Development Corporation. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the Oaks at 4 Corners Development Corporation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I turn to the staff for presentation.
Thank you. I'm here to present staff's recommendation to select Edgewood Management Company as the management agent for the Oaks at 4 Corners Development Corporation. The current contract is set to expire on June 30th with Edgewood Management Company. The new management agreement will result in a fee increase of $12,132 due to assuming 100% occupancy along with inflationary adjustments. The new contract will be effective from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026. Staff recommends the Board of Directors of Oaks at Four Corners Development Corporation approve the new property management contract with Edgewood Management Company.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-0020 OC? So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So carried. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call the meeting of the Paddington Square Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. I turn the presentation to the staff.
Thank you. I'm here to present staff's recommendation to select Residential 1 as the management agent for Paddington Square Development Corporation. The current contract is set to expire on June 30th of this year. The new management agreement will result in a decrease in the management fee relative to the 2024 budget of $2,076. The new management agreement will be effective from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026. Staff recommends the Board of Directors of Paddington Square Development Corporation approve the new contract with Residential 1. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-002 PS?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call the meeting of the Poops Hill Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. I turn the presentation to the staff.
Thank you. I'm presenting staff's recommendations to select Edgewood Management Company as the management agent for Pooks Hill Development Corporation. The current contract is set to expire at the end of June this year. The new management agreement will result in a management fee increase of $17,984 due to proposal assuming 100% occupancy along with inflationary adjustments. The new contract will be effective from July 1st, 24 to June 30th, 26. Staff recommends that the Board of Directors of Pooks Hill Development Corporation approve the new property management contract with Edgewood Management Company. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-002 PH?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I now call the meeting of the RAD 6 Development Corporation to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And now turn to the staff for presentation.
Thank you. I'm here to present staff's recommendations to select Edgewood Management Company as the management agent for RAD 6 Development Corporation. The current contract is set to expire on June 30th, 2024 for all 6 properties. The new management agreement will result in an increase in management fees of $79,608 due to proposals assuming 100% occupancy along with inflationary adjustments. The management agreements are also changing from contract assisted to fully third-party managed. The new contract will be effective from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026. Staff recommends the Board of Directors of RAD 6 Development Corporation approve the new property management contract with Edgewood Management Company.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-003, RAD 6? So moved. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. This concludes the Development Corporation meetings. We will now convene HOC's regular monthly meeting. Pursuant to section 3-305B and D of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I move to adopt the written closing statement dated April the 3rd, 2024, and to adjourn this open session to a closed session to discuss 2 topics. The first topic is the potential acquisition of properties located in Bethesda. The reason this topic is being discussed in closed session is to protect HOC's ability to negotiate. The statutory section that allows this topic to be closed is 3-305B3. The second topic is discussion of potential development opportunities. This topic is being discussed in closed session in order to protect the confidential commercial and financial information provided to HOC by third parties. The statutory section that allows this topic to be closed is 3-305B13. If a member of the public that is watching this meeting in real time on YouTube wishes to object to this closed meeting, please comment in the YouTube chat box or contact HOC's General Counsel. Instructions can be found in the Open Meetings Act objection procedure, which is posted on HOC's website. Do I have a second?
Second.
Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. We are now officially adjourned as of 6:42 p.m.
Thank you.